ॐ शुक्लांभरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तमुपास्महे। श्रीमहागणपतये नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां भिषजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां श्रीहयग्रीवमुपास्महे। श्रीहयग्रीवमूर्तये नमः। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारंभं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। श्रीमहासरस्वत्यै नमः। उमाकोमलहस्ताब्ज सम्भावितललाटकं हिरण्यकुण्डलं वन्दे कुमारं पुष्करस्रजं। வெற்றிவேல் முருகனுக்கு ஹரஹரோஹரா. லோகவீரியம் மகாபூஜ்யம் சர்வரக்ஷாகரம் விபும் பார்வதி ஹிருதயானந்தம் சாஸ்தாரம் பிரணமாம்யகம். स्वामिये शरणमय्यप्पा। वागर्ताविव सम्पृक्तौ वागर्तप्रतिपत्तये जगतः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ। श्री पार्वती परमेश्वराभ्यां नमः। कोमलं कूजयन् वेणुं श्यामलोऽयं कुमारकः वेदवेद्यं परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। पीतांबरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खकौमोदकी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायम् अतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः। कृष्णादेव समुद्भवो मम विभो कृष्णस्य दासोऽस्म्यहं। कृष्णे भक्तिरचञ्चलास्तु भगवन्। हे कृष्ण तुभ्यं नमः। श्री गुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरणभ्यर्थितानपि अर्थान् कामानजस्रं वितरति परमानंद सांद्रां गतिं च। इत्थं निःशेषलभ्यो निरवधिक फलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं शक्रवाटी ध्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्त्यव्रजोऽयम्। श्री गुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं श्री भट्टपादम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वंशी विभूषितकरात् नवनीरदाभात् पीतांबरात् अरुणबिम्बफलाधरोष्टात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने। കൈരണ്ടും കൂപ്പി ഞാൻ വീണ്ടും ഇറക്കുന്നു നീരജലോചന നിന്നോടായി. ഏതീനു മഞ്ഞനെ കുംഭീരേന്ദാത്തോരു പ്രീതിയിൽ നീ എന്നെ പാലിക്കെന്നായി. കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ. Welcome everyone to the class. So we'll do a quick, I think 69 we stopped until 6 or 7. So we'll do maybe Purnima, can you chant until whatever we learned on 69?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Jai Krishna. Om Shri Krishnaya Parapramane Namaha. केशपाशधृतपिञ्चिका वितति सञ्चलन् मकरकुण्डलम् हारजालवनमालिका ललितमङ्गरागघनसौरभम् पीतचेलधृतकाञ्चिकाञ्चितमुदञ्चदं शुमणिनूपुरम् रासकेलिपरिभूषितं तव हि रूपमीश कलयामहे तावदेव कृतमण्डने कलितकुञ्चुलीककुचमण्डले कञ्चुली तावदेव कृतमण्डने कलितकञ्चुलीककुचमण्डले गण्डलोलमणिकुण्डले युवतिमण्डले तपरिमण्डले अन्तरा सकल सुन्दरी युगलमिन्दिरा रमण सञ्चरन् मञ्जुलां तदनुरासकेलिमयि कञ्चनाभसमुपाददाः वासुदेव तव भासमानमिह रासकेलिरससौरभम् दूरतोऽपि खलु नारदा गतितमाकलय्य कुतुकाकुला वेशभूषणविलासपेशलविलासिनी शत समावृता नाकतो युगपदागता वियति वेगते वेगतोत सुरमण्डली वेणुनादकृततानदानकलगानरागगतियोजना लोभनीय मृदुपातपातकृततालमेलन मनोहरम् पाणि पाणिसङ्क्वणितकङ्कणं च मुहरं सलम्बितकराम्बुजं श्रोणिबिम्बचलदम्बरं भजत रासकेलिरसडम्बरम्.
Third line, sorry, Purnima, third line, muhuram. You don't have to repeat it, but I think you said mahuram.
Okay.
Kankanam cha muhuram.
Okay.
Go ahead. Continue.
It is muhurams, ramsa.
Muhuramsa, correct.
Okay. Shraddhaya virachitanuganakృతతారతార మధురస్వరే నర్తనేతలలితాంగహారలులిత हाङ्गहारमणिभूषणे लुलिताङ्गहारमणिभूषणे सम्मदेन कृतपुष्पवर्षमलमुन् सम्मदेन कृतपुष्पवर्षमलमुन्मिषद्दि विशिधाङ्कुलं चिन्मये त्वयि निलीयमानमिव सम्मुमोहसवधूकुलम् स्विन्न सन्नतनुवल्लरी तदनु कापि नाम पशुपाङ्गनां कान्तमं समवलम्बते स्म तव तान्तिभारमुकुलेक्षणां काचिदाचलितकुन्तला नवपटीरसारगणसौरभम् वञ्चनेन तव सञ्चुचुम्बभुजमञ्चितो रुपुलकाङ्कुरम्
काङ्कुरा.
काङ्कुरा कापि गण्डभुवि सन्निधाय निजगण्डमाकुलितकुण्डलम् पुण्यपूरनिधिरन्ववाप तव पूगचर्वितरसामृतम् How do you say that?
Bihriti.
Vihriti, okay.
Yeah.
Indira Vihriti Mandiram Bhuvana Sundaram Hinatanantare Tvama Vapya Daduranga Nafkimuna Sammadonmada Dasha Sammadonmada
Dashantaram.
Sammadonmada Dashantaram.
Very good.
Ghana
I think that's where we stopped, right? I think
we stopped in 8, right?
Was it? Okay. Sorry, go ahead then. Sorry, I thought 7.
Rajesh ji, ஒரே ஒரு நிமிஷம். So the second line la Puga Charvita Rasayanama
Rasamritam.
Rasamritam. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Purnima, sorry.
Anamisha Viratam Kramena Kila Vadyamela Namuparatam Brahma Sammadara Sadasi Kevalam Nanutru Ranganaha.
Can you, and the last word, Nanru tu Ranganaha.
Nanru tu Ranganaha. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Na vidhannapina nivikam kimapi kuntalimapi cha kanchulim jyotishamapi kadambakam divi vilambitam kimaparam bruve.
Very good. The third line is a small correction. Navidannapi cha nivikam. You said navidannapi na nivikam. You said it's a cha there, not a na. Okay. Okay, very good. Next, I want today class Shubhadra and Jyoti Garu, you can be students. So anyone other than those two who wants to chant 69?
I can try, Rajesh Garu.
Okay, go ahead.
I can try to, Rajesh Garu.
And maybe both of you can do half of four each, right?
Half?
Yeah,
okay,
do 4.
Yeah. Sri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha. Keshapashadruta pinchika vitati sanchalan makara kundalam harajalavana malika lalita mangaraga ghana saurabham pita chela druta kanchi tamudancha damshu maninupuram rasa keli paribhushitam tava hirupamisha kalayamahe तावदेव कृतमण्डने कलितकञ्चुलीककुचमण्डले गण्डलोलमणिकुण्डले युवतिमण्डलेऽथ परिमण्डले अन्तरा सकलसुन्दरी युगलमिन्दिरा रमणसञ्चरन् मञ्जुलां तदनुरासकेलिमयि कञ्जनाभसमुपादधाः वासुदेव तव भासमानमिह रासकेलिरससौरभम् दूरतोऽपि खलु नारदा गदितमाकलय्य कुतुकाकुला वेशभूषणविलासपेशलविलासिनी शतसमावृता नाकतो युगपदागता वियतिवेगतोऽथ सुरमण्डली वेणुनादकृततानदानकलगानरागगतियोजना लोभनीय मृदुपादपातकृततालमेलनमनोहरम् पाणिसङ्क्वनितकङ्कणं च मुहुरं सलम्बितकराम्बुजम् श्रोणिबिम्बचलदम्बरं भजत रासकेलिरसडम्बरम् श्रद्धया विरचितानुगानकृततारतारमधुरस्वरे नर्तने तललिताङ्गहारुलुलिताङ्गहारमणिभूषणे सम्मदेन कृतपुष्पवर्षमलमुन्मिषद्दिविशदाङ्कुलम् चिन्मये त्वयि निलीयमानमिव सम्मुमोहसवधूकुलम् विन्नसन्नतनु वल्लरी तदनु कापि नाम पशुपाङ्गना कान्तमं समवलम्बते स्म तव तान्ति भारमुकुलेक्षणा काचिदाचलितकुन्तला नवपटीरसारगणसौरभम् वञ्चनेन तव सञ्चुचुम्बभुजमञ्चितोरुपुलकाङ्कुरा कापि गण्डभुवि सन्निधाय निजगण्डमाकुलितकुण्डलम् पुण्यपूरनिधिरन्ववाप तव पूगचर्वितरसामृतम् इन्दिरा विहृति मन्दिरं भुवन सुन्दरं हि नटनान्तरे त्वामवाप्य ददुरङ्गनाः किमुना सम्मदोन्मददशान्तरम् गानमीश विरतं क्रमेण किल वाद्यमेलनमुपारतम् ब्रह्म सम्मदरसाकुला सदसि केवलं नृतुरङ्गनाः नाविदन्नपि च नीविकां किमपि कुन्तलीमपि च कञ्चुलीं ज्योतिषामपि कदम्बकं दिवि विलम्बितं किमपरं ब्रुवे.
Very good. I think, sir, as you all found out too, it's a relatively easy chapter. It looks tough, but it is actually a pretty easy chapter, right? Okay, we'll start with continue with 9, 10, and 11. So Jyoti Garu and Shubhadra, you can be students, okay? Answer 9. मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनां मन्मता सहन चेतसां पशुपयोषितां सुकृतचोदितः तावदाकलितमूर्तिराधदितमारवीरपरमोत्सवान्. So moda simni bhuvanam vilapya bihritim samapya cha tato vibho, comma keli sammridita nirmalanga nava gharma lesha subhaghatmana. मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनाम्.
मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनाम्. मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनाम्.
मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनाम्. मोदसीम्नि भुवनं विलाप्य विहृतिं समाप्य च ततो विभो केलि संमृदित निर्मलाङ्गनवघर्मलेश शुभगात्मनाम्.
मन्मथा सहन चेतसां पशुप योषितां sukrita choditaha. So put a visarga at the end of that line and a comma. Next line, that is goes away. So tavadha kalita murtir adhadita, if you want to break it, or murti radhadita together. Maravira paramotsavan. Manmata sahana chetasam pashupayoshitam sukrita choditaha tavada kalita murti radhadita maravira paramotsavan.
मन्मथा सहन चेतसां पशुपयोषितां सुकृतचोदितः तावदा कलितमूर्तिराधदितमारवीरपरमोत्सवान्. मन्मथा सहन चेतसां पशुपयोषितां सुकृतचोदितः तावदा कलितमूर्तिराधरितमारवीरपरमोत्सवान्
मन्मता सहन चेतसां पशुप योषितां चोदितः तावदा कलितमूर्तिरादतित मारवीरपरमोत्सवान् मन्मता सहन चेतसां पशुभयोषितां सुकृतचोदितः तावदा कलितमूर्तिरादतित मारवीरपरमोत्सवान्.
Stanza 10. केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजापयसि चारुनाम विकृतिं व्यदाः काननेऽपि च विसारिशीतलकिशोरमारुतमनोहरे सूनसौरभमये विलेसितविलासिनि शतविमोहनम्. केलि भेद परि लोलिता भिरति lalita bhira. First is lolita bhirati, next is lalita bhira balalibihi comma swairamisha nanu suraja payasi charu nama vihritim vyadhaha. केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजा पयसि चारुनाम विहृतिं व्यधाः.
केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलाभिः बलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजापयसि चारुनाम विहृतिं व्यधाः. केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजापयसि चारुनाम विहृतिं व्यधाः.
केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजापयसि चारुनाम विहृतिं व्यदाः. केलिभेद परिलोलिताभिरतिलालिताभिरबलालिभिः स्वैरमीशननुसूरजापयसि चारुनाम विहृतिं व्यदाः.
काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतल किशोर मारुत मनोहरे सून सौर भमये विलेसित विलासिनी शत विमोहनम्. काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतल किशोर मारुत मनोहरे सून सौरभमये विलेसित विलासिनी शत विमोहनम्.
काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतलकिशोरमारुतमनोहरे सूनसौरभमये विलेसितविलासिनी शतविमोहनम्. काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतलकिशोरमारुतमनोहरे सूनसौरभमये विलेसितविलासिनी शतविमोहनम्.
काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतलकिशोरमारुतमनोहरे सूनसौरभमये विलेसितविलासिनी शतविमोहनम्. काननेऽपि च विसारि शीतलकिशोरमारुतमनोहरे सूनसौरभमये विलेसितविलासिनी शतविमोहनम्.
Last answer. कामिनीरितिः यामिनीषु खलु कामनीयकनिधे भवान् पूर्णसम्मदरसार्णवं कमपि योगी गम्यमनुभावयन् Brahma Shankara Mukanapiha Pashupanganasu Bahumanayan Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam Kamini Riti Ki Yaminishu Khalu Kamaniya Kanidhe Bhavan, Purna Sammadha Rasarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan. If you want to break it, you can break it at that ma there. Gamyam Anubhavayan or Gamyam Anubhavayan together. Kamini Ritihi Yamini Shukhalu Kamani Yakanidhe Bhavan Purna Sammadara Sarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan.
Kamini Ritihi Yamini Shukhalu Kamani Yakanidhe Bhavan Purna Sammadara Sarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan. Kamini Ritihi Yamini Shukhalu Kamani Yakanidhe Bhavan Purna Sammadara Sarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan.
Kamini Ritihi Yamini Shukalu Kamani Yakanite Bhavan Purna Sammadara Sarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan. Kamini Ritihi Yamini Shukalu Kamani Yakanite Bhavan Purna Sammadara Sarnavam Kamapi Yogi Gamyam Anubhavayan.
Brahma Shankara Mukana Piha Pashu Panganasu Bahumanayan, Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. So the last line you have to say 3 times. I'll just tell you how to say that 3 times. When you're repeating it, just say this time, say it 1 time, but say the last line 3 times. Brahma Shankara Mukana Piha Pashupangana Subahumanayan Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam.
Brahma Shankara Mukhanapiha Pashupangana Subahumanayan Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Brahma Shankara.
Just say the last line 3 times, right?
Okay. Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Bhakta Loka Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Shri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha.
Brahma Shankara Mukana Piha Pashupangana Subahun Manayan Bhakta Loga Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Bhakta Loga Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Bhakta Loga Gamaniya Rupa Kamaniya Krishna Paripahimam. Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane.
That completes 69. So we'll move on to 98 next. So 98 is a little bit of a tough chapter. 98 and 100 are tough chapters. So we can go at a pace that is comfortable, right? So this 98 is it's like the Namaskara slokam. I don't know how many of you, I don't know Sri Devi Garu and Jyoti Garu, if you stayed back till the end on that day, but that's kind of like a Namaskaram slokam, right? So people
Yes.
so we did Namaskaram at the end of every thing. So it's a pretty important chapter. That's why we are kind of doing that. It's very philosophical. It's a lot of philosophy in that. So I'll try to explain it in a very simple way. But at the end of every line is to that Krishna, I am doing Namaskarams. That's how it ends every stanza, right? Okay, start with stanza 1. Yasmin etat vibhatam yata idam abhavat yena chedam yayetat yosmat uttirna rupaha khalu sakalamidam bhasitam yasya bhasa yo vacham dhura dhure punarapi manasam yasya deva munindraha no vidyus tattva rupam kimu punarapare Krishna tasmai namaste. So here, since it's a meditation, Nishkala Brahmopasana. Upasana means meditation. Nishkala Brahman is a Nirguna Brahman. So it's a meditation on the Nirguna Brahman. So it's also kind of like a meditation thing. Plus, you can also do it for Namaskaram. So first, Bhattaripad is starting off saying is defining the Brahman. Right here is saying that Brahman, he says, from which the universe came into existence, on which the universe actually exists today, into which the universe eventually merges, and it says, and which is the universe itself as well, right? And it's way beyond that universe. So it's kind of comparing it to the universe, and then it says, and this is the one which is illuminating that universe, and yasya bhasa, it's the one which illuminates the universe, and it is the illumination itself, right? So it's a very complicated thing, and he himself says that this definition of it is yo vacham dhura dure. This description of it is far beyond, manasam, beyond people's mind, beyond people's contemplation. And he says not just, it says even for deva and munindraha, even for the gods and even for the sages, they cannot contemplate on what the meaning of this means, what he just described earlier, right? And he says, Kimu punarapare, what about the rest of us? Even the gods and the devas cannot understand the original or the true definition of us. What about the rest of us? We are definitely not going to understand. But he says to that Krishna, to that Brahman, tasmai namaste, right? My salutations, or I'm doing namaskarams to that Krishna. So yasmin netat, it's a yasmin etat, but then it becomes a double na when you join it. So yasmin netat vibhatam yatha idham abhavat. So the dya, if you have it, you first make it a ta and then put a comma. Yatha idham abhavat, comma. Next word becomes yena. So yena chedam ya etat. So put the it at the end of that line and a comma.
Can you please repeat it again? Is it dyen?
Yeah.
Can you please repeat
it?
Yeah.
So the yasmin netat vibhatam yata idam abhavat, comma. Okay, you have a de there, right? De.
Yeah.
So the de, we are breaking it into it and a ye. Okay. So you put ida abhavat, comma, it, comma. Next becomes yena chedam ya etat. Again put a it at the end of that line and a comma. So next line you have dyo, right? The dyo becomes yo, yo. So yosmad uttirna rupaha. Yosmad uttirna rupaha, put a comma. Khalu sakalamidam bhasitam yasya bhasa. Yasmin etat vibhatam yata idam abhavat yena chedam yayetat yosmad uttirna rupaha khalu sakalamidam bhasitam yasya bhasa. Jyoti, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yasminnetad vibhatam yata idam abhavat yena chedam yatetat yosmaduttirna rupaha kalu sakalamidam bhasitam yasya bhasa. Yasminnetad vibhatam yata idam abhavat yena chedam yatetat.
No, that line. Yena chedam ya yetat.
Yena chedam yetat.
Ya yetat. Ya is one word. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yena chedam ya yetat yosmaduttirna rupaha खलु सकलमिदं भासितं यस्य भासा
यस्मिन्नेतद्विभातं यत इदमभवत् येन चेतं य एतत् योऽस्मात् उत्तीर्णरूपः खलु सकलमिदं भासितं पश्य भासा
Yasya bhasa.
यस्य भासा
Ratish, in the second line, yosmaduttirna rupaha.
Yeah.
So can you say do or you have to say u?
No, it's you can say yosmad uttirna rupaha together. If you want to break it, it will become yosmad uttirna rupaha. If you want to break it, you can break it there.
Okay.
यस्मिन्नेतत् विभातं यत इदमभवत् येन चेदं य एतत् योऽस्मात् उत्तीर्णरूपः खलु सकलमिदं भासितं यस्य भासा
Yo vacham dura dhure, comma, punarapi manasam yasya deva munindraha, comma, no vidyus tat twarupam. So there's a double half ta is there. So no vidyus tat twarupam kimu punarapare, comma, Krishna tasmai namaste. Yo vacham duradhure punarapi manasam yasya deva munindraha no vidyus tattvarupam kimu punarapare Krishna tasmai namaste.
यो वाचां दूरदूरे पुनरपि मनसां यस्य देवा मुनीन्द्राः नो विद्युस्तत्त्वरूपं किमु पुनरपरे कृष्ण तस्मै नमस्ते यो वाचां दूरदूरे पुनरपि मनसां यस्य देवा मुनीन्द्राः नो विद्युस्तत्त्वरूपं किं पुनरपरे कृष्ण तस्मै नमस्ते
यो वाचां दूरदूरे पुनरपि मनसां यस्य देवा मुनीन्द्राः नो विद्युस्तत्त्वरूपं किमु पुनरपरे कृष्ण तस्मै नमस्ते यो वाचां दूरदूरे पुनरपि मनसां यस्य देवा मुनीन्द्राः नो विद्युस्तत्त्वरूपं किमु पुनरपरे कृष्ण तस्मै नमस्ते
Stanza 2. Janmato karma nama sphutamiha gunadoshadikam vana yasmin lokanamutaye yah swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari bhibracchattira rupopi cha bahutara rupo vabhatyadbhudatma tasmai kaivalyadhamne pararasa paripurnaya Vishno namaste. So here it's also telling that for you as a Brahman, there is nothing like a birth. There's no birth. There is no death. There is no qualities either. There's nothing like you're good or you're evil. You don't have any of those qualities. However, that Brahman, you as a Brahman, do take birth, right, in this world. When you take birth in this world, you then take on different forms. So in that case, you do have a birth and you do have activity. You do perform actions, right? And you do go by names. And you're doing that, all of that for the protection of the world. That's why it says you're doing all these things. Here it says for Lokana Muti, for the protection of the world, you swayam anubhajate, you yourself take all these things, right? And you have a name, you then have a birth, you then have, you're going away from that, and you have all those things only for the better of the world. And you also then, with the power of your Maya, you have all the various gunas, right? Where all the various attributes. If you think of any of the avataram, they have all these actions and all these attributes. All of that is only taken for the purpose of that incarnation. And then, although you are formless, right? It just says you don't have any form. Bahutara rupaha, you also take multiple forms. right? And all of those forms you are doing, and although you are formless and people cannot understand that, because of the avidya, because of the ignorance, they think of you as somebody separate. So the word vidya, right, in Sanskrit means knowledge, and that knowledge doesn't mean the original definition of vidya. Knowledge doesn't mean just knowledge of things. It's a knowledge of the understanding of the non-duality, that there is no dual things, there's no God and there is no human, it's all one. So that is the original knowledge. But the opposite of that, not having that knowledge, is the ignorance, and that ignorance is what is making people see you as a separate person, as Lord Rama or as Lord Krishna. But it says at the end of the day, all of those are you, which is Brahman itself. So that's what is defining. And to that Vishnu, Paripurnaya, to that Vishnu, supreme bliss himself, that Vishnu, namaste, I do my salutations. So Janmato karma nama sputam iha, comma, guna doshadikam va na yasmin, comma, lokanam utaye, if you want to break it, or you can say lokanam utaye together, yaha, comma, swayam anubhajate, if you want to break it, swayam anubhajate tani mayanu sari. Janmato karma nama sputamiha gunadoshadikam vanayasmin lokanamutaye yaha swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari.
Janmato karma nama sputamiha gunadoshadikam vanayasmin lokanamutaye yaha swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari. Janmato karma nama sputamiha gunadoshadikam vanayasmin lokanamutaye yaha swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari.
Janmato karma nama sputamiha gunadoshadikam vanayasmin yo lokanamutaye yaha swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari. Janmato karma nama sputamiha gunadoshadikam vanayasmin lokanamutaye yaha swayam anubhajate tani mayanusari.
Bibrach, that each sound, bibrach chatir, the emphasis cha, chatir arupopi, if you want to break it, or so bibrach chatir arupopi or bibrach chatira rupopi together, cha, comma, bahutara rupova bhatyat bhudhatma. You have to kind of say that together. It's not very difficult to break it. So bahutara rupova bhatyat bhudhatma, comma, tasmai kaivalya dhamne, comma, para rasa paripurnaya Vishnu namaste. Bhibrachatira rupopi cha bahutara rupo vabhadyat bhudhatma tasmai kaivalya dhamne pararasa paripurnaya Vishnu namaste.
One quick question, Rajesh ji. The third line, the last one is Bhutatma or just to singing?
Bhutatma. Bhutatma. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Bhatyat Bhutatma.
Okay, is it Vibhatyat Bhutatma, or because in my this thing it says Vibhatyat?
No, it's Rupa Avabhadyat is the actual word. So, but that's the A there is not a full A, it's a Sanskrit S type of A. So you kind of have to say it with that Rupo. So Rupova Bhadyat Bhudatma.
So it is Rupova.
Yeah.
Rupova Bhatyat.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Bhibrachakira rupopi cha bahutara rupova bhagyad bhutatma tasmai kaivalya dhamne pararasa paripurnaya Vishnu namaste.
The third line is Bhutatma, not I think I heard you as Bhu, yeah.
I know, Bhutatma, okay. बिभ्रच्छक्तिररूपोऽपि च बहुतररूपो वभात्यद्भुतात्मा तस्मै कैवल्यधाम्ने पररसपरिपूर्णाय विष्णो नमस्ते.
रूपोऽपि च बहुतररूपो भवात् अद्भुतात्मा तस्मै कैवल्यधाम्ने पररसपरिपूर्णाय विष्णो नमस्ते. बिभ्रच्छक्तिररूपोऽपि च बहुतररूपो भवात् अद्भुतात्मा.
Sorry, Subhadra on that line. So bahutara rupova bhatyat. It bhatyat. You can say bahutara rupova bhatyat adbhudatma. That is fine, but then it's easy to say it together. So yeah, but bhatyat, that's the correction I want to make.
Okay. Biprachaktira rupo vicha bahutara rupo vavatyat pudatma tasmai kaivalyadamne pararasa paripurnaya vishno namaste.
Chansatri. No tiryanchanna martyam nacha suram asuram nastriyam no pumamsam na dravyam karma jatim gunamapi sadasatvapi te rupamahuhu shishtam yatsyan nishedhe sati nigamashatair lakshana vrittitastat kritshrena vedhyamanam Parama Sukhamayam Bhati Tasmai Namaste. So I know in math, right? When if you rewind back to when you did your 11th and 12th grade math, when you did the theorems and everything, there was one way where you did it where you said, I'm going to take the opposite assumption and then I'm going to prove that assumption wrong, and therefore the original thing is was not correct, right? And that's how you kind of do the theorem, right? Or you could kind of say that one minus concept, right? You kind of take something, you define what you know, and then you subtract everything which is not that definition. So that's how the Brahman is defined here, which says couple of characteristics, and I might have said this in the first chapter. I don't remember if I said it. One is the Brahman difference between Brahman and humans, right? Is one is it is Satyatvam, which means it is not subjected to karma. So all of us are subjected to karma. Every thought, action, words, everything we speak is creating karma, and that's the reason we are born. But the Brahman itself cannot be subjected to karma. That's one difference. Two is knowledge. So a year back, none of you knew Narayaneeyam, but right now you know almost 18 chapters of Narayaneeyam. So the knowledge you have is at a given point in time what knowledge you have, but you don't have all knowledge at all time. So that is Jnanatvam, and that is what definition of humans, right? And then the Anantatvam is the finiteness of it. So right now I am sitting in Long Grove at this point in time. 2 hours back I was sitting somewhere else, right? So my location and my time, only based on that I am defined where I am. So I'm not infinite, I'm very finite. The fourth thing is Anandatvam, and that means happiness. So we know that definition, right? We are all happy when something happens, but we don't have that permanent bliss because our happiness is dependent on something. And the last one is Amalatvam, which is fault. We all have our faults. Nobody is completely pure. So when you kind of take all these definitions and say all these 5 things define a human, so the definition is Brahman is something who's not subjected to any of these things. That's one way of defining. So here, in a similar way, Bhattacharya is saying your form, right, te rupam, is na tiryanchanna martyam. It is not that of a bird. It is not that of an animal or a human, martyam. Nacha suram na asuram. It's not that of a god. It is not that of a demon. Na striyam na pumamsam. It is not that of a man. It is not that of a woman either, right? Na dravyam karma jatim. Na dravyam is any substance. It's not any material that you can define, right? It is some kind of a material. It's not a material. It is not an action either. It's not an action. And na jatim. It doesn't belong to any species either. So that person, when you kind of take that, and it's existing non, and you take all of that and say anything which is not that. That is how the Upanishads define you as a Brahman. And they say it's impossible to define Brahman. So what they're saying is they define everything else. And then they say anything which is not what I defined, whatever is left and which cannot be defined itself, that is the Brahman. To that supreme Brahman, Parama Sukhamayam, which is that infinite bliss, Bhati Tasmai Namaste, I vote you. So that is the definition of Brahman as per the Upanishads. If you ask what is that, that is how the Upanishads are defining it. And that's what Bhattacharya is also condensing here. So, no tiryanchanna martyam, comma, na cha suram asuram, na cha suram asuram, comma there, na striyam no pumamsam, comma again, na dravyam karma jatim, comma, gunamapi sadasat vapi te rupam ahuhu. No tiryanchanna martyam, na cha suram asuram, na striyam no pumamsam, na dravyam karma jatim, gunamapi sadasat vapi te rupamahuhu.
No tiryam cham na martyam, na cha suram asuram, na striyam no pumamsam, na dravyam karma jatim, gunamapi sadasadvapi te rupamahuhu. No tiryam cham na martyam, na cha suram asuram, na striyam no pumamsam, na dravyam karma jatim, gunamapi sadasadvapi te rupamahuhu.
No tiryancham namatyam. No tiryancham namartyam, nachasuram asuram, nastriyam no pumamsam, nadravyam karma jatim, gunamapi satasatvapi te rupamahu.
Rupam ahuhu.
Rupam ahuhu.
Yeah.
Rupam ahuhu. No tiryanjam namatyam, nachasuram asuram, nastriyam no pumamsam, nadravyam karma jatim, gunamapi satasatvapi te rupam ahuhu.
So it is not mahuhu.
It's rupam ahuhu.
Okay, because it says ma here.
Yeah, so rupam ahuhu, that becomes rupam ahuhu together.
Oh, okay. But we can just say rupa mahuhu.
Yeah, you can say rupam ahuhu together. Yeah.
Okay. Fair. Thank you.
Shishtam yat syan nishedhe sati, comma, nigama shatair lakshana vritti tas tat, comma, krichre, the ch has a r underneath it. So krichre na vedyamanam, comma, parama sukhamayam bhati tasmai namaste. Shishtam yatsya nishedhe sati nigama shatair lakshana vritti tastat kritrena vedyamanam parama sukhamayam bhati tasmai namaste.
Shishtam yatsya nishedhe sati nigama shatair lakshana vritti tastat krichrena vedyamanam parama sukhamayam bhati tasmai namaste. Shishtam yatsya nishedhe sati nigama shatair lakshana vritti tastat krichrena vedyamanam parama sukhamayam bhati tasmai namaste.
Shishtam yatsya nishedhe sati nigama satai lakshana vritti tastat krichrena vedyamanam parama sukhamayam bhati tasmai namaste. Shishtam yatsya nishedhe sati nigama sadai lakshana vritti tastat vajrena vedyamanam paramasukamayam bhati tasmai namaste. Rajesh, quick question. So nigama sataihi at the lakshana.
If you have shataihi, just put a ir to join to the next. Yeah. Okay. Some books automatically have the ir, some books may not have it.
Okay. Satair lakshana. Okay. Perfect. That's what I want. Thank you.
Stanza 4. Mahyayam bimbitastvam srijadi mahadahankara tanmatra bhedaihi bhuta gramendriyadhyirapi sakala jagat swapna sankalpa kalpam bhuyas samhritya sarvam kamatha iva padhanyatmana kala shaktya gambhire jayamane tamasi vitimiro bhasi tasmai namaste. So in Kapilopakyanam, right, Dasakam 15, when we learned it long time back. So there is the stanza which comes Prakriti Mahadahankara Tanmatra Bhedehi Bhuta Gramendriyadhyirapi Sakala Jagat Swapna Sankalp. Sorry, I said this one. Prakriti Mahadahankara Prakriti Mahadahankarascha Matrascha Bhutani Api Hridapi Dashakshi Purusha Panchavimshaha. He goes on to describe that Purusha and then the 24 other attributes, right? So similarly here it says the Brahman doesn't have any of those forms. We defined all of that earlier. However, because of your Maya, you then reflect yourself with the Mahat. Mahat means Buddhi here. Ahankaram is the ego. So all these layers, right? The Pancha Tanmatra, the sound, touch, form, taste, smell, all of this Tanmatra. And then the Pancha Bhutam, the 5 elements, along with the Indriyangal, the sense organs and the action organs, right? So all of those, so all of the 24 other things are reflected because of your Maya, you're projecting it. And the best example they're giving is the whole thing is like a dream. And when you finally, with time, decide to pull everything back, all of these things just vanishes completely. And the example here is Kamata Iva Padan, as if a tortoise has those 4 feet, it has outside. And then at some point, the tortoise just pulls all those 4 feet inside, everything disappears. That 4 feet disappears. So that's what they say is when you decide that you want to stop projecting your Maya, all of these things disappear. Till then, all of these things continue to exist, and all of this is just a reflection of yourself, right? So to that, and then when everything becomes dark, you still are shining. That Brahman, you still are shining, and to that Vishnu, Tasmai Namaste. So this is very similar to what Kapilopakyanam they had kind of explained when Kapila had explained to Devahuti, right? So Mayayam Bhimbi Tastvam, Srijasi Mahad Ahankara. So you can say that together. Mahad Ahankara Tanmatra Bedaihi. Put a visarga at the end there and a comma. Bedaihi. Next line on top of that bhu, if you have a ir, right? Remove that ir off. So bhuta gramendri yadhye. So bhuta grama indriya. Those are the 3 words, but you can't quite split it that way. So bhuta gramendri yadhyairapi, comma sakala jagat swapna sankalpa kalpam. Mayayam bimbitastvam srijasi mahadahankara tanmatra bhedaihi bhuta gramendriyadhyirapi sakala jagat swapna sankalpa kalpam.
Mayayam bimbitastvam srijasi mahadankara tanmatra bhedaihi bhuta gramendriyadhyairapi sakala jagat swapna sankalpa kalpam. Mayayam bimbitastvam srijasi mahadankara tanmatra bhedaihi bhuta gramendriyadhyairapi sakala jagat swapna sankalpa kalpam.
Mayayam.
Sorry, ஒரே ஒரு question. Shrujatiன்னு இருக்கு தமிழ்ல. First line.
Okay. Yeah, I think some books have it as Srijati. Can you just change it to Srijasi?
C.
C.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sa.
मायायां बिम्बिदस्त्वं सृजसि महदहङ्कार तन्मात्रभेदैः भूतग्रामेन्द्रियात्यैरपि सकलजगत् स्वप्नसङ्कल्पकल्पम् मायायां बिम्बिदस्त्वं सृजसि महदहङ्कार तन्मात्रभेदैः भूतग्रामेन्द्रियात्यैरपि सकलजगत् स्वप्नसङ्कल्पकल्पम्
Bhuyaha, you have to put a is there. Bhuyas samhritya sarvam, comma, kamatha iva padanyatmana. So it's padani atmana, two words combined together. So padanyatmana kala shaktya, comma, gambire jayamane tamasi vitimiro, comma, bhasi tasmai namaste. Bhuyas samhritya sarvam khamata iva padhanyatmana kala shaktya gambhire jayamane tamasi vitimiro bhasi tasmai namaste.
Bhuyas samhrutya sarvam kamataiva padanyatmana kala shaktya gambhire jayamane tamapi nitimiro bhasi tasmai namaste. Bhuyas samhrutya sarvam kamataiva padanyatmana kala shaktya gambhire jayamane tamasi nitimiro bhasi tasmai namaste.
भूयः संहृत्य सर्वं कमट इव पदान् पात्मना कालशक्त्या गम्भीरे जायमाने तमसि विधिमिरो भासि तस्मै नमस्ते.
Shubhata, the third line, that padan yatmana, you can't break it, you can't stop in it. So it's kind of like it's two words already joined together. So okay.
भूयः संहृत्य सर्वं कमट इव पदान्यात्मना कालशक्त्या गम्भीरे जायमाने तमसि वितिमिरो भासि तस्मै नमस्ते.
Stanza fine. Shabda brahmeti karmetyanyuriti bhagavan kalayithyalapanti tvamekam vishwahetum sakalamayataya sarvata kalpyamanam vedantairyattu gheetam purusha parachidatmabhidham tattu tattvam preksha matrena moola prakriti vikriti krit Krishna tasmai namaste. It goes on to describe that you Brahman is also the Shabda Brahma, means the Omkaram. It's the primeval sound, the Om sound. You are that sound itself. You are also the karma. You are also the anu. You are also the atom. You are also the smallest particle that can ever be there. You are also that particle, and in every. And you are described like this in the Upanishads in every conceivable way. There's no way they have not described you, saying you are in everything, right? They're describing everything. And that in the Upanishads, in the Vedanta, they're calling you as Purusha Parachit Atma. They're calling you as all these names. Purusha is the Purusha that we spoke about in the earlier one, which is the original source of creation. Then Para means the highest. Para is like in English, they're the most, right? The highest order. So it's like superlative thing, such as supreme being. Para. Chit is pure consciousness. And Atma is the Atma itself. So saying you are all of these things. And it says, Preksha Matrena, just by your glance, right? That Prakriti, which is nothing, then gets modified. And when it gets modified, that's why when you saw in the previous one, all the Mahat, Buddhi, Ahankaram, Tanmatram, all of that gets caused. And all of that gets caused just by your glance, that Prakriti becomes changed. So to that Krishna, Tasmai Namaste, my salutations to you. So, Shabda Brahmeti Karmetyanuriti. So that's a Karmeti Anu. It's two different words combined, but you can't break it there. So Karmetyanuriti Bhagavan, comma, Kala Ityala Panti, comma, Tvamekam Vishwahetum, comma, Sakala Mayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam. Shabda Brahmeti Karmetyanuriti Bhagavan Kala Ityalapanti Tvamekam Vishwahetum Sakalamayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam.
Shabda Brahmeti Karmeti Anuriti Bhagavan Kala Ityalapanti Tvamekam Vishwahetum Sakalamayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam. Shabda Brahmeti Karmeti Anuriti Bhagavan Kala Ityalapanti Tvamekam Vishwahetum Sakalamayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam.
Shabda Brahmeti Karmeti Anuriti Bhagavan Kala Ityalapanti Tvamekam Vishwahetum Sakalamayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam. Shabda Brahmeti Karmeti Anuriti Bhagavan Kala Ityalapanti Tvamekam Vishwahetum Sakalamayataya Sarvata Kalpyamanam.
Vedantair Yattu Geetam, Purusha Para Chidatma Bidam. Chit Atma Abidam. 3 words, but you say that together. Chidatma Bidam Tattu Tattvam, Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krit, Krishna Tasmai Namaste. Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parachidatmabhidham Tattu Tattvam Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krit Krishna Tasmai Namaste.
Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parachidatmabhidham Tattu Tattvam Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krit Krishna Tasmai Namaste. Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parachidatmabhidham Tattu Tattvam Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krit Krishna Tasmai Namaste.
Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parichadat Mavitam Tattu Tattvam Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krita Krishna Tasmai Namaste. Vedantair Pattu Geetam
Yattu Geetam.
Yava Pavati. Sorry. Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parichadat.
Sorry. Purusha Parachidatmabhidam. Para.
Okay. Vedantair Geetam Purusha Parachidat Mabhidam Tattu Tattvam Preksha Matrena Mula Prakriti Vikriti Krita Krishna Tasmai Namaste.
Stanza 6. Satvena Sattayava Nacha Khalu Satvena Nirvachya Rupa Dhatte Yasava Vidya Guna Phanimativad Vishwadrishya Babhasam Vidyatvam Saivayata Shruti Vachanalabhaihi Yat Kripasyandalabhe Samsararanya Sadhyastrutana Parashutameti Tasmai Namaste. So again, here they're defining that avidya, right? Ignorance. And they're saying the ignorance, it cannot be described as existing or not existing. I'll give you a simple example, right? If I ask you, are you ignorant? If you say yes, you can't say yes, because if you are actually, if you say yes, I'm ignorant, that's not possible because you are not ignorant, right? That's why you're able to say you're ignorant, right? So it kind of gets into that complex thing of, you just think about it. If I ask you, you can't say yes or no. It's a very difficult answer because you don't know if you're ignorant or you don't know if you're not ignorant either, right? So that it cannot be described as existing or non-existing. And the reason they are saying that is, this ignorance is what is making you look at the duality aspect of Brahman versus non-Brahman, right? Like we keep telling, the whole concept of Advaitam. Dvaitam means two, Advaitam means non-duality. So in reality, it is a non-dual existence. There's no two things. It's just one thing. But all of us, right, because of this ignorance, it says you keep looking at it as two different things, right? That's because it says the soul is so conditioned to think of certain things. And one example, I don't know if you heard of this story where a king called Janak is there. And then he once has a really bad dream where he's lost all his kingdom. He's walking around in the streets and he's lost all his wealth. And then he's like a beggar begging for things. And then somebody gives him water in a bowl, and then he starts drinking from that bowl. And then somebody comes and knocks that bowl off. Some donkey or something comes and knocks that bowl off. And then he's trying to drink water from the dirt. So he suddenly wakes up from his dream, right? And he's so paranoid because he literally felt that. And I'm sure we all have had dreams where he literally felt that thing. So he calls the sage and says, hey, I had the dream and it looked so real that I cannot tell it is a dream. I was in the moment, right? I was suffering from it. I was crying from losing everything. But now I'm sitting in my kingdom. I'm having all these ministers. So what is the truth? So that sage says, na ye sach, na wo sach. Bas tu hi sach. That sage says, it's a Hindi story. He says, neither the dream is true, nor is this true. Only your soul is the ultimate truth, right? So he says that a king doesn't understand what is the truth. So similarly, that's what they're saying here is because of the way the soul is conditioned to think, we keep thinking of it as two things. It's very difficult for us to comprehend. And the example they give here is guna pani mativat. A rope, when you look at it in the dark, the rope will look like a snake. However, when you turn the light on, you realize that it is not a snake and it is actually a rope. So that light has to fall on it for you to understand the reality. So similarly, when that vidya, when that avidya, ignorance becomes vidya, when that becomes true knowledge, as a result of kripa, yat kripa, as a result of your grace, then that is the one which is going to samsararanya sadhya, the whole forest of this samsara, it is going to cut it like an axe. Your grace is going to cut it like an axe. And that's the only way you can actually get the vidya and you can understand the truth. So to that, my salutations. Right? So satvena sattayava. So satvena asattayava, but it's together. So satvena sattayava, comma, na cha khalu sadasat tvena, double hafta is there. So na cha khalu sadasat tvena nirvachya rupa, comma, datte yasava vidya, comma, guna pani mati vad vishwa drishyava bhasam. Satvena sattayava nacha khalu sada satvena nirvachya rupa datte yasava vidya guna pani mati vad vishwa drishyava bhasam.
Satvena sattayava nacha khalu satvena nirvachya rupa datte yasava vidya gunapani mativad vishvadrishyava bhasam. Satvena sattayava nacha khalu satvena nirvachya rupa datte yasava vidya gunapani mativad vishvadrishyava bhasam.
Satvena satyava.
Satvena. Sorry. Yes. Can you start again?
Satvena sattayava.
Sattayava, correct.
Satvena sattayava nacha khalu sadasatvena nirvachya rupa datte yasava vidya gunapani mativat vishvadrishyava bhasam.
Drishyava bhasam.
Vishvadrishyava bhasam. Satvena sattayava nacha khalu sadasatvena nirvachya rupa datte yasava vidya gunapani mativat vishvadrishyava bhasam.
Vidhyatvam saiva yatha shruti vachana lavaihi. So that ir, which is on top of the next letter ya, remove that ir and put a visarga and a comma. Shruti vachana lavaihi, comma. Yat kripa syanda labhe samsararanya. That's one word. Samsara aranya. So samsararanya sadyas trutana parashutam eti tasmai namaste. There's no comma in the last line. Vidyatvam. Go ahead.
Sorry, Rajesh. Samsaranyanda irukku. Rendu ra illa. Samsararanya. Samsara aranya. Think of it that way. So samsararanya. First on the long ra, apra ra. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
Samsararanya. Okay,
correct.
Thanks.
Vidyatvam saivayata shruti vachana labhaihi yat kripasyanda labhe samsararanya sadhyastrutana parashutameti tasmai namaste.
Vidyatvam saivayata shruti vachana lavaihi yat kripasyanda labhe samsararanya sadhyastrutana parashutameti tasmai namaste. Vidyatvam saivayata shruti vachana lavaihi yat kripasyanda labhe samsararanya sadhyastrutana parashutameti tasmai namaste.
Vidyatvam saivayata shruti vachana lavaihi yat kripasyanta labhe samsararanya satyastridana parasutam eti tasmai namaste. Vidyatvam saivayata shruti vachana lavaihi yat kripasyanta labhe samsararanya satyastridana parasutam eti tasmai namaste.
We'll do two more today, 7 and 8, and then we'll stop. Stanza 7. Bhushaso swarna vadhva jagati ghatashara vadike mrittikavate tatve sanchinthyamane spurati tadadunapya dvidiyam vapuste swapna drashtuv prabhode timiralaya vidhau jirna rajjoscha yadvate vidya labhe tathaiva sputamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste. Again, they're going and giving examples where they say, when you look at a jewelry, right, when you wear all the fancy jewelry, everybody is, admiring all the great designs of the jewelry. But at the end of the day, the jewelry is nothing but just gold, right? So it was originally in the form of a gold, but now at the moment it became jewelry, you are thinking of it as a specific object. Similarly, they're saying a clay pot, you can put color and then you make it design and you put all the various designs on the pot. At the end of the day, when you break it or when you squish it, it becomes clay again. So at the end of the day, it is just clay. But you think of it as a pot. That's what you call it. You call it as a jewelry and various names against it. So that's what they're saying is similarly, this one Brahman that is there, people are thinking of it as two different. One is Brahman and one is human and all the other things. But at the end of the day, it is all the same thing. That's what they're saying. And they're saying eventually when you, just like how when you wake up from the state of sleep or a state of dreams, you then realize that all of this was just a dream. And what the reality is, that reality, you will get it. And, eventually when, because of your blessings, right? And again, they're giving that example of when you turn the light on, that's when you realize that the rope was, it is not a snake, it is a rope. So that knowledge also comes. So to that one Brahman, Krishna, tasmai namaste, my salutations to you. So bhushasu swarna vadhva, comma, jagati ghata sharavadike mritti kavat, put it at the end of that line, mritti kavat, comma. Next line, ta, on the ta, if you might have had a half ta also, remove that off. So it becomes tatve sanchintyamane, comma, spurati. The next word, you may want to break it as tat adhanudhap, adhanu. So tadanu, tadadu is there. It's difficult to say it that way. So break it into tat adhuna. Okay, tat adhunap ya dvitiyam vapuste. So I'll say it again. Spurati tat adunapyat dvitiyam vapuste. That might be the easiest way to say it, but if you're able to say it together, go ahead with it. Bhushasu swarnavadhva jagati ghatashara vadike mrittikhavate tatve sancintyamane spurati tat adhunapyadvitiyam vapuste.
Bhushas swarnavadva jagati ghatasharavadike mritikavat tatve sancintyamane spurati tad adhnap advitiyam vapuste. Bhushas swarnavadva jagati ghatasharavadike mritikavat tatve sancintyamane spurati tad adhnap advitiyam vapuste.
Not advitiyam. So that word tat adunapyadvitiyam.
Adhunap, okay. Tatve sancintyamane spurati tad adhunap yadvitiyam vapuste.
Correct. You have to say it together because it is tat adunapi advitiyam. It's actually adunapi advitiyam, but it becomes joined, right? So that's why tat adunapi advitiyam.
Advitiyam. Okay. Okay.
Bhushasu swarnavadva jagati gadasara vadike mritikavat tatve sancintyamane purati tat adunabhyatvatiyam vapuste.
Sorry, the last line, tat adunapyadvitiyam.
Okay, pyatvatiyam. Okay.
Yeah.
Bhushasu swarnavadva jagati gadasara vadike mritikavat tatve sancintyamane purati tat adunabhyatvatiyam vapuste.
I'm hearing it as dvatiyam. It's dvitiyam.
Sorry, dvitiyam. Okay.
Okay.
Tatve sancintyamane spurati tat aduna dvitiyam vapuste.
Correct.
Okay.
Swapna drashtuhu. So put a if there. Swapna drashtuf prabodhe, comma, timira laya bidau jirna rajjosh cha yadvat. Put a it at the end of that line, comma. Next line, if you have dvi, it becomes a v. So vidya labhe tathaiva, comma, sputamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste. Swapna drashtuf prabodhe timira laya vidau jirna rajjoshcha yadvate vidya labhe tathaiva sputamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste.
Swapna drashtu prabodhe timiralaya vidhau jirna rajjoshcha yadvat vidyalabhe tathaiva smutamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste. Swapna drashtu prabodhe timiralaya vidhau jirna rajjoshcha yadvat vidyalabhe tathaiva smutamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste.
Swapnadrashta prabodhe timiralaya vidau jirna rajjoscha yadvat vidyalabhe tathaiva sputamapi vikaset krishna tasmai namaste. Swapnadrashta prabodhe timiralaya vidau jirna rajjoscha yadvat vidyalabhe tathaiva sputamapi vigaset krishna tasmai namaste.
Answer 8. Yadbhintyo deti suryo dahati cha dahano vati vayustathanhe yadbhita padmajadyah punaruchita balina harantenu kalam yenhai varopitah prang nijapadamapite chya vitarascha paschat tasmai vishwam niyantre vayamapi bhavate krishna kurmah pranamam. So because of whom it says yad bhityo deti suryo, the sun rises, Dahati cha dahano, the fire actually is burning and the wind actually is able to blow, and Brahma and all of the others are performing their appropriate functions at the appropriate time, and they're all at their respective places. And at the end of the creation, all of them are later on sucked back into it, and all of them are removed again, and everything gets eliminated. So to that Vishwam Niyantre, to that controller of that world, who is Bhavate Krishna, Vayamapi Bhavate, in the form of Krishna, Kurma Pranama, right? Salutations. So yet bhityo deti suryo, comma, dahati cha dahano, vati vayus tathanye. I'm just trying to think if I had a comma after dahano. Yeah, I think dahati cha dahano, comma, vati vayus tathanye, comma, yet bitaha is there, so put a if, yet bita padma jadhyaha, comma, puna ruchita balin aharante or balin aharante together. So balin aharantenu kalam. So that word is together, so you can't break that last part. Yad bhityo deti suryo dahati cha dahanho vati vayus tathanye yad bhita padmajadhyah punaruchita balinaharantenu kalam.
यद्भीत्योदेति सूर्यो दहति च दहनो वाति वायुस्तथान्ये यद्भीताः पद्मजाद्याः पुनरुचितबलिनाहरं तेऽनुकालम् यद्भीत्योदेति सूर्यो दहति च दहनो वाति वायुस्तथान्ये यद्भीताः पद्मजाद्याः पुनरुचितबलिनाहरं तेऽनुकालम्
यद्भीत्यो तेदि सूर्यो दहति च दहनो वादिवायुस्तदान्ये यद्भीता पद्मजात्याः पुनरुचित बलीन् आहरन्देनुकालम् यद्भीत्यो देदि सूर्यो दहति च दहनो वादिवायुस्तदान्ये यद्भीत पद्मजात्याः पुनरुचित बलीन् आहरन्देनुकालम्
येनै वारोपिताः, कॉमा, प्राङ् निज पदमपिते, कॉमा, च्या वितारश्च पश्चात्, comma, so 3 commas there. Tasmai Vishwam Niyantre, comma, Vayamapi Bhavate Krishna Kurmaha, so put a if there, Kurmah Pranamam. Yenhe Varopitaha Prang Nijapadamapite Chya Vitarascha Paschate Tasmai Vishwam Niyantre Vayamapi Bhavate Krishna Kurmah Pranamam.
येनैवारोपिताः प्राङ्निज पदमपिते चावितारश्च पश्चात् तस्मै विश्वं नियन्त्रे वयमपि भवते कृष्ण कुर्मः प्रणामम् येनैवारोपिताः प्राङ्निज पदमपिते चावितारश्च पश्चात् तस्मै विश्वं नियन्त्रे वयमपि भवते कृष्ण कुर्मः प्रणामम्
येनैवारोपिताः प्राङ्निजपदमयिते
Apite Nijapadam apite
प्राङ्निजपदमपिते
okay.
चाविदारश्च पश्चात् तस्मै विश्वं नियन्त्रे वयमपि भवते कृष्ण कुर्मः प्रणामम् येनैवारोपिताः प्राङ्निजपदमपिते चावितारश्च पश्चात् तस्मै विश्वं नियन्त्रे वयमपि भवते Krishna kurma pranamam.
We'll stop the class here. Sandhanandhavabodhatmakamanupamitam kaladeshavadebhyam nirmuktam nityamuktam nigamashatasahasrena nirbhasyamanam aspashtam drishtamatre punarurupurusharthatmakam brahmatattvam tattavat bhadi sakshad gurupavanapure hanta bhagyam jananam काहेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि.